Look, attribution is great, but in the end, attribution it's a feature in itself. It's like the link between an outcome and the things that happened before that. You can solve many use cases with it, but some of those use cases are actually better solved with some level of automation.
It's Attribution Nation time, where we look at attribution from multiple angles in a unique mini-series format. Our first 5 episodes are all about attribution history. Let's go! I'm your host, Drew Smith, founder and CEO of Attributed, and I have with me Lars Grønnegaard. Lars is the CEO and one of the co-founders of Dreamdata, which is based out of Copenhagen, Denmark, and they're one of the big players in the attribution space here. So Lars, I want to start this because this mini-series is about the history of marketing attribution. So I want to go back into the history, and I want to go take a journey back to when the idea for Dreamdata entered your brain. I think you were at Trustpilot at the time. So let's start with just when was this happening where the idea for Dreamdata was entering your brain?
Great question. And thanks, Drew, for taking the time to talk to us here in Copenhagen. I'm super happy to be on the show. So really looking forward to the conversation today. So I'll take you through how we got started on Dreamdata and how we fit into the history of B2B attribution software. So like you say, with 3 co-founders, and me and Ole, we worked together at a company called Trustpilot, which is like a review platform it's a European company. It's also in the States. It's massive in, of course, our native Denmark. It's huge in a small country, but we're also pretty big in the UK, and there was a customer base in the US as well, for sure. So we're working there. We're actually not in the marketing team. We're not in the sales team. We're the product team, right? So I'm the head of product. Ole is the SVP tech, and we're building the product there. And this product is, it's a SaaS product we're selling to businesses. So it's a B2B SaaS from a monetization standpoint, but we have a huge consumer community that's driving a lot of at least leads for this SaaS sales motion. And I guess you can sort of feel where this is going. Like, we all know what it's like to drive a lot of leads for a sales motion. So that's what we were doing. And so it was you can say it was like a PLG, like product-led motion, at least part of it. And we loved saying that, the product was driving all the business, but at the same time, you'd meet up with, in the management team and the sales team, they were also driving all of the business, and the marketing team, they also drove all of the business. And somehow, we did 150, but each of us did 100, which is kind of impossible, right? So it's a different version of the attribution problem than what marketers face, but pretty much the same anyway. So that's how we got started. And then I think when we founded the company, I was in 2018. So it wasn't like attribution was a new idea. I remember my very first introduction to attribution. I read an article. It was not written by Scott Brinker, but it was like an article that he had a co-author on it. And it was basically like, I don't believe in marketing attribution. That was the introduction to it. And I think that was maybe from 16 or something, right? But we got started on trying to figure out what was actually the impact of all this activity we did. And we realized that we also talked a lot to the marketing team. They had the same problem. So we got started on the problem. And I think I wouldn't say a problem. We thought of it as like a great place to come from. We had a ton of data. It's very much like companies now. Like you have, the average GTM organization probably has 100 tools, at least 50, right? So there's a lot of tools in go-to-market. And all these tools, they all generate a lot of data. And they're all customer-centric and focused and aiming to deliver value for the customer. So they're all delivering this, a lot of data about the customer journey. So we had a lot of that. Like we had Salesforce, we had HubSpot for marketing automation, we had segment.com for tracking. So we had like billions of data points of tracking data.
But it's all in different systems. Yeah.
But we had all that stuff. We were early adopters of what you call the modern data stack. So we had back then that was Redshift. That was the place to be. We had a Redshift data warehouse. It was full of data. we managed to get it all in there. Like we're early adopters of like moving data with ETL tools. And then when we faced this problem, we're like, okay, so where is this money actually coming from? Except, somebody's signing the deals. We went looking for a product that would just fix this for us. Like we had all the data, but like we didn't want to go through the pain of stitching it all together. So we just looked for a product. And then we realized that didn't exist. And I think we went through sort of a buying cycle with Visible, which was like a big company already at that point. And we felt that it didn't work for that type of company that had a lot of data. And I think that's, Visible was probably 7-8 years earlier than us. And when they were founded, like people didn't have that much data. Like, of course, there wasn't, the stack was probably, 10, and lots of people didn't have tracking data. So it's a different starting point. So we started at this like same time as I would say modern data stack started to become a big thing, and we needed a solution that sort of solved for that situation, and that's why we, one, had to build ourselves, and two, ended up saying, okay, there's got to be other companies out there with the same problem, and that's how we got started in the company. Yeah, sorry, okay. That was a very long story.
No, that's great. That's great. And you have a little bit of an interesting story about how your third co-founder, Stefan, got involved in the company, because he wasn't with you at Trustpilot. So tell me about how Stefan became one of your co-founders.
Yeah, so Stefan was, because we're kind of originally, I would say, we're product people. And, when you're a product person, if you're smart, and we think we are, you try to not build too much before you know if it's a good idea. So even though we were quite convinced this is a great idea, we went out with our prototype and our slides and tried to sell to pretty much every B2B marketer in Copenhagen to see if other people, like, is there actually somebody who will pay for this? And Stefan was, I think, maybe number 2 person we talked to. So he was working at another growth stage company in Copenhagen. We got introduced to him, and then he was like, yeah, I absolutely don't believe that you can do any of what you say, but anyway, I'll take the meeting. And then we came in, and that was a bit the same situation, like CRM system full of data, marketing automation full of data, lots of data and ad platforms, a lot of tracking data they were also using Segment. So there was a lot of data. And then I think we wowed him and impressed him by being able to take all that data and integrate it and actually give him answers. I think back then this wasn't a product; it was more like copy paste of what we did before and try to make it work, stitch it together and see. But I think that's a good approach when you're building something new, not to overinvest. So that's how we got started there, and then basically Stefan joined the company because he was super excited about the opportunity. And that was sort of like, at that point, I guess we had one paying customer, and then he joined, and then we went through the whole journey since then.
So instead of paying customer number 2, he said, no, I just want to join the company.
Exactly.
Yeah, he just joined awesome. The company. I love that.
So he bought into the company, and we're super happy about that. And I think it's been, of course, because we come from the product side, having a strong, also I would say like technically oriented, like performance oriented marketer as part of the founding team has been like insanely valuable for us in sort of like understanding what does that persona that is a typical buyer or user of the product actually look like.
Yeah, because you and Ole are coming from the standpoint of product people that are solving a problem, and then Stefan is coming from the standpoint of the person that has the problem. Exactly. And so being able to combine that together is really powerful because you get the different perspectives. Yeah, really powerful there. Absolutely. So you got Stefan on board and the company launched. And at the time the company launched, what was kind of the state of the category of B2B attribution at the time that you launched?
So I would say when we launched, I think the category was pretty much visible. So that was pre the acquisition from Marketo and the subsequent acquisition by Adobe. So there was just visible. And that was sort of the point of reference out there. Like, there were other smaller sort of niche players in the market. But if you went out to a B2B like 250 plus maybe like 1,000 people company, like any sort of like mid-market type of company, they would typically have no solution.
Mm-hmm.
And in a very few cases, they'd have visible, and that was it, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
and no solution is usually stitching together, stuff from all the different point solutions, like those I don't know how many hundreds of tools. Get the data out, get your intern to stuff it into PowerPoint and bring it to the board, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just, I mean, hours and hours of brute force
Hours
labor
and
to,
hours.
to make it work. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So now, when you started at the time, it was an interesting time because you being based in Denmark, you started right at the time, right after GDPR really became a thing that marketers had to care about, particularly in the EU or organizations that are not necessarily in the EU, but are selling into the EU. So how has GDPR kind of influenced your organization? Because from my perspective, it feels like it was both probably an advantage and a disadvantage. But tell me a little bit about how GDPR has really kind of shaped Dreamdata.
I think it definitely. I think again, sometimes like the point when you start in time impacts how you build. And for us, it was a huge advantage that GDPR happened before we started the company, because at the previous company, we went through the transition of taking sort of a non-compliant organization and making it compliant. And that was just like a year of hard work and making a lot of people angry by, you can't do that, and no, you can't just pick up whatever tool you want. Like so many things that were sort of practices that were happening in a SaaS organization that were just not okay from a GDPR standpoint. So for us, starting after that experience definitely sort of helped us. They set the path for a product that worked in a privacy aware world in that sense, right? So, you know, there were lots of things that were sort of like super exciting before GDPR that doesn't really happen anymore, and that got squeezed out. So we were born at a time when everybody knew that the future was sort of like first party or zero party data. So we never had to sort of think too much about like third party data, because it was so clear that was going away very fast. And at that point already, it was predictable that browsers were going to become more restrictive about what they would expose. And so I think it was super helpful for us to start after that, and it made us build the product in a much more privacy aware way than what we would have done. I mean, some of it is down to a bit like the technicalities of building the product. Like I think if we had started 5 years before, we would probably have had many more components, like external components, in the actual sort of infrastructure of the product. Whereas under GDPR, you need to know exactly where your data is, and you just want as few components in your product as possible. So you build in a bit more conservative way. So that was super helpful to start at that time. Yeah, I think we have a sort of along the way, there's been sort of occasional, where we had like wins because of GDPR. There was this like ruling in, like, I don't know if you know it, but there was a ruling in
Yeah,
Austria, which
yeah.
basically, I'm not a I'm not a law student, but fundamentally sort of said, okay, you cannot use Google Analytics if you're in the European Union. Like that was more or less what it said. And it meant that a lot of people went searching for other solutions. And I mean, our product it's an attribution product, but underneath, I would say it is like a B2B customer data platform, which has like of course a huge tracking component. I think any attribution platform has to have that. So there's a huge tracking component, and that meant that we could offer basically like a B2B compliant version of Google Analytics for European companies. And I think we had quite a sort of nice success out of that.
Yeah, I remember when that ruling came down, and I remember you all jumping at that and doing a lot of marketing around that. And that seemed to me, from obviously from an outsider perspective, but somebody who's deeply ingrained in attribution, that seemed to me to be something that kind of like kickstarted your growth. Do you feel that, do you also have that, agree with that it helped kickstart some of the growth of Dreamdata?
It was definitely part of it. I think so. Stefan, like I talked about Stefan and what it meant having him join. I think it also meant that we from the get-go went for, I would say, like a marketing-led approach to go to market, where a lot of companies will lean into more of a sales-led motion at the sort of early stage. We were leaning like heavily into a marketing-led motion. And that's also why you probably saw that, because at that point we were like a tiny little company, but Stefan is a great marketer. He makes us look large, and also like at very early stage we look large. So he has done a lot in finding things that can be wins for us from a marketing perspective, and also that are cost efficient or cost effective.
Yeah, that one, I remember that one being really, just kind of just inflated your presence in the market. Like it just went from Dreamdata is kind of new on the scene to all of a sudden like there's this massive problem that Dreamdata is solving for, and you guys kind of blew up around that time, at least again from my perspective. So now obviously Stefan is doing marketing at the time. Were you doing sales? Was Ole doing sales? Who was selling the product?
So I mean, at that stage, everybody is selling. We were at that stage already, I would say it was sort of an inbound sales motion. And I would say at that point, we already had sort of hired our first 2 reps. So we hired, Sander and Laura, who were first reps. And then Laura is like a LinkedIn celebrity now. So they both joined in like 2020 and started building up like a more, how do you get out of founder-led sales? It doesn't mean the founder isn't part of the sale, but how do you create something that is repeatable, but with people that you can find out there? You can't just add a new founder every time you want to add a salesperson. You need a motion that works for sales professionals as well. So they helped us build up that. So at that point, they were running the sales and of course pulling in founders to sort of throw a little magic in the discussion. But they were fundamentally running the sales at that point.
Okay, so they joined around 2020-ish.
Yeah.
So about a year. So you launched in 2019. You brought on Sander and Laura around 2020. Okay, interesting. Now, obviously, we're 4 years after you signed on your first sales reps, 5 years after you really launched. So what's been the evolution of Dreamdata over the years? What are some of the things that you learned early on? What are some of the mistakes that you made early on that you corrected? And how have you kind of evolved into what Dreamdata is today?
I think we had some learnings, which, because we went very marketing oriented and inbound, we deviated a bit too much from our sort of ideal customer profile early on. When we looked back, sort of quite early on, we could see that, okay, we actually spent too much time just trying to sell to different profiles of companies that they deviated from what we thought was our ideal company profile, but they came inbound and they looked exciting and we tried. And some of those, I think they were great learnings. I mean, like some of it was like selling to, like, I would say true enterprise customers with a very flaky product. And okay, so the learning was we can sell to true enterprise. This is an enterprise problem. There's nothing wrong with us or whatever, but we probably need a bit more of a bit more robust product and better support to handle like enterprise type clients. So there were those types of learnings where we course corrected and sort of went more focused after that. I think some of the things that happened along the way that when we started out, we had this, because we started with this, I would say like it's a data problem. We had this like massive, you have all these go-to-market tools that's producing this, like say data disaster or data swamp or whatever you want to call it, that everybody's like, as a go-to-market professional, you're just overwhelmed because you have 15, 20, 30 different answers to the same question. And you really want like the truth or something that you can hold on to and sort of repeat as the way you do this. So the fundamental idea that the problem wasn't so much one of sort of creating more data, but more one of making sense of the data that exists and integrating that. I think that we've held on to that, and that's still our philosophy. And then what we are then adding on is saying, okay, look, attribution is great, but in the end, attribution is, I would say, it's a feature in itself. It's like the link between an outcome and the things that happened before that. You can solve many use cases with it, but some of those use cases are actually better solved with some level of automation. I think like we always had like a sort of one type of use case, which was like the reporting planning use case, was like, oh, we made, this many new business deals last quarter. Where did they come from? That type of reporting. But we always had also sort of ROI type of reporting going the other way, saying like, I spent, I don't know, 200,000 euros worth, dollars worth of LinkedIn ads last month. What became of that spend? Like, how many marketing qualified leads has that delivered so far? How much pipeline have we built with it? And then like the use cases, then of course going back and then looking at the individual campaigns, switching budget, et cetera. And we always thought that if you go to a larger company, that becomes hard because if you're a larger company, you might have multiple marketing teams. It gets super complicated to do that optimization, and you sometimes have a lot of things to optimize. So we always thought that it would be great to sort of deliver things that would help automatically optimize this. So that's one of the things we're delivering now as well.
Okay.
The key thing there initially is using some of the conversion APIs offered by the ad platform. So feedback, it is attribution data that you feed back because they can't get that in other way. Like Google doesn't know who converted in your Salesforce instance. And LinkedIn doesn't know, who became an MQL because it didn't happen somewhere they care about. So feeding that data back enables an AI optimization of your ads on those platforms. And I think that is the direction we're going, is saying, okay, look, yeah, you can do reporting. Yeah, you can do manual optimizations, but now we're starting to look at ways to like activate the data directly.
Okay. All right, so I want to get a little bit more into future state a little bit later on. You're jumping ahead on that,
okay,
but that's good. We're going to come back to that. But I think one of the things that I think is interesting is you mentioned ICP, and I want to just touch on that for a second. So when you started the company, did you have an idea of who your ICP was at that point in time? And has that changed over the years? Is your ICP different, or is it still the same as it was back in 2019?
So it is shifting. I think we started. This is also like how you think about building a scalable company. We started at the bottom of the market. So we wanted to build something that was fundamentally scalable. And the way you do that is you build something that a lot of companies can adopt. So we started, like our initial ICP was actually like 50, like B2B SaaS companies, 50 to 500 people. So that's, I would say, like the very bottom of the market. And then we gradually now sort of shifting up the market. Now I would say our ICP is still a SaaS company. That's sort of the core ICP. So now significantly larger. So 250 people and up. So our small company size is like 250 to 1,000. And then we have like a mid segment of 1,000 to 5,000 and then upwards after that. So we shifted the size. It's also very typical for a SaaS company to go up market as you grow. So that's not uncommon. And then I would say we are starting now to add companies to the customer base that are not tech companies. And as we are building out now, we're building out an outbound sales motion. Everything has been inbound so far, but now we're building out outbound. Then we'll start targeting companies that are not SaaS companies, but larger companies that are outside of the SaaS vertical.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so it's starting to expand outside of SaaS. Okay, very cool. Very interesting. Now, I want to circle back to, you mentioned Laura briefly, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Laura because I've spoken to Laura numerous times. I like Laura a lot, but I love what she does with LinkedIn. And I think that's one of the things that's been so unique about Dreamdata is your LinkedIn presence and how you have enabled your team members to be advocates for the company out on LinkedIn. And it's clear that's been one of the big levers for your organization to grow. So tell me a little bit about how and why you kind of made the decision to kind of, to not just allow folks to do that, but to encourage and enable that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good story. I think like we try to do a lot of things. As a company, we're open to people trying things. You can try something as long as it's not damaging and not insanely expensive. So we're open to that. And one of the things we tried in sort of early 2021 was LinkedIn. So Stefan came up with this idea like, hey, how about we sort of commit to each other? We're all going to post, 3 times a week on LinkedIn and like actively comment and then see what comes out of that. And then we did that and we had a target. I think we had like 300. We had sort of like how many views will we get on LinkedIn or something. And we smashed that target. And we also saw that, okay, it sparked off sales conversations and it sparked off sort of, I would say like community building with those people we're selling to. And there was a feeling that, okay, this is actually, we're building an audience here. It's fun and we're connecting with the people we're selling to. So that's how it started. And then, some people lean into it and some people jump head into it first and they go all in. And Laura is one of those people. So she really enjoyed that approach. And then that sort of became a key part of our go-to-market. So a key part of that inbound sales motion now is that like we do organic on LinkedIn. So we do lots of sort of building audience, talking to people, being part of the community. But then we also buy a lot, right? So we like most of our paid marketing investment is on LinkedIn because that way we can also better measure what's going on, right? You got to eat your own dog food. And definitely like.
Well, and you also paid for a billboard as well.
Yeah. I mean, the billboard was a fun idea. Is that like super? That's an example of something where Laura came and said you were going to a conference in New York, and the conference was actually on Times Square. And she was like, "Oh, can I buy a billboard in Times Square?" And like surprise Stefan. I was like, "Yeah, whatever, do it." Like, how much is it? Like $500. I was like, "Whatever, no problem. You can buy a $500 billboard in Times Square." And then she did that video. And I think mostly because of his reaction, which was like, what the Laura? And very natural. So it became like really sort of like something that you would like to share. And also, we spend maybe, I don't know how much time Hugo spent on the creative, but he did this creative like a CMO wanted to spend his money on Google Ads or something, which is just funny. And then it just became like this super nice little thing that we could use. And then we leaned into it, did a lot of sort of organic posting about it, but also bought a lot of paid attention for it. Yeah, so that was I think it's a kind of thing where you can't repeat it because it was just like a fun, other people can repeat it in a different way or even the same way. It's not that, but like for us, it's like that was a fun piece of content. We can't recreate that piece of content, but then because we're quite open to sort of say like do things you can't measure and then turn it into something you can measure, then we do create a lot of this. Like Laura did this series of, I don't know if you saw it, like she's interviewing people like I don't know, it's a Copenhagen thing. It's called like a Christiania bike. It's like a cargo bike. And then she has this person sitting in front of this cargo bike and she's riding around Copenhagen interviewing the person and then like posting that. We did it in New York. I was like, you can't do that in New York. But then we hired like a bike taxi and then you could actually do it. So we got like a bike taxi and then you could sit there and have a conversation. And, some of that turned out to be great content that will travel a lot. But I do think that there's a lot of giving people the freedom to try things out. And then when something works, then you lean into it. Then you invest, then you put money into it and say, it's fine. You can spend some of your time and a little bit of money on this. And then we see if it works, then we invest.
I think that there's something that you said here that I want to just take a quick minute to zoom in on, which is there's actually 2 things in particular that I want to zoom in on here. Number one is the importance of still having a little bit of fun with marketing, particularly B2B marketing, tends to be really boring, we'll call it. I mean, it's white papers, it's case studies. There's not a lot of fun in B2B marketing. And the billboard thing was fun. It started out as something fun and a surprise and almost a joke. And then you all turned it into something that just, I mean, it blew up on social media. And so I think it's important for people to remember that marketing can still be fun, even in B2B. The other thing that I wanted to just touch on as well is, even as people that work in attribution, there are things that can be tracked by attribution, and there are things that cannot be tracked by attribution. A billboard in Times Square cannot be tracked by attribution in and of itself. Now, the way that you activated that billboard on social media, that can be tracked with attribution. Some of it can, some of it can't. But it's important to know what can and cannot be tracked. Having this mindset and idea of, well, we're not going to track it, or it can't be tracked, and so we're not going to track it, whether it can or can't is irrelevant to that. But having an actual strategy to say, look, this can be tracked, and here's how we're going to track it. This cannot be tracked, and we're okay with that. Like, it's okay to be okay not tracking things that can't be tracked. It's important for organizations to understand the difference between those things. And I think that's something that most organizations think is, they just don't take that intentional approach behind it, right? Like, they just kind of say, well, maybe it can, maybe it can't, who knows? But in this case, you knew that the billboard itself can't be tracked, and you're like, it doesn't matter, we're going to do it anyway. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's so important that, of course, like, let's say you have, I don't know, a paid budget of $1 million a month. Of course, you're going to have, you need sort of robust tracking around what's going on with that budget. But can you take, I don't know, $10,000 out of that, or 20, 25, whatever, and have fun, experiment, let people try things? That's going to drive creativity in your organization, and that will create stuff that you can then measure later that will, that you scale. So I think it's like the whole idea of like, okay, as long as you're not spending like all your money somewhere, or, then it's fine. Of course, I mean, if you try to think of ways of sort of, you'll usually know if something was a success. Like, okay, if people reposted a lot, okay, it was a success. And then you can try to put some budget into it, see what happens. If that works, you can put some more budget into it. But I think if people can create more of those memorable moments, like you say, it also makes B2B marketing much more interesting, right? It doesn't mean like don't do right. Like I would say a lot of B2B marketing is also enabling the buyer, and like that's serious stuff. Like, somebody is buying your product, and they need to understand what that product is, how it works. There's a lot of seriousness there, which you need to respect and support, but you also need to do the other thing.
Yeah, I think it's important for marketing to have like you're talking about here, is like having like almost like a little research and development budget in marketing to just try new stuff. So I want to move on to kind of where marketing attribution is right now. So what are some of the things that you're seeing in the attribution industry right now? What are some of the trends that you're seeing? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing just with attribution?
I think the fundamentally sort of this trend of like seeing attribution as sort of the link between what you do and the outcomes when you can measure it, and then turning that into something, I would say, more intelligent, something that is more automated. I think that's quite fundamental. So make use of, because basically when you're building, if you're building an attribution system, whether you're building it yourself or buying something, underneath that, for it to work really well, you need sort of a super robust data platform. And I think building that data platform is so costly that you need more use cases for it. So you need to activate it, and you need to sort of, I would say, sort of have a bit of a data strategy as a marketer, and attribution is part of that data strategy. And then what justifies the investment is having sort of great, like outside of reporting and optimization with reports, you have activations of that data. And some of those activations become smarter and smarter. I think you'll see like, you already see that in lots of attribution platforms that does like lead scoring and intent scoring and a lot of things that are based on that relationship between, like, you look at a lot of things you did, a lot of outcomes. Okay, that is sort of the foundation for building a great, at least like engagement type lead score. So those types of things, I think that's going to be some of the future of the space.
I think the word that you mentioned, and you've mentioned this a couple of times, is activation. That's the word that comes to mind for me, because there's a lot of marketers out there that have really great data, but they aren't activating that data. They aren't putting it to work, and they aren't turning that data into insights and things that you can action upon. And so I think that activation of data is just such a key thing that marketers need to focus on. Is great, you have the data. What are you doing with it? How are you activating it?
Yeah. And once you
I think leads, go ahead.
Sort of, because to do great attribution, you need to get all the data together. You need to sort of clean it up, join it, build a great data model. But that data model, I think one of the things back before we founded the company, we saw when we built that data model, that Trustpilot company where we were at, well, we saw that, it was the first time we had churn prediction that actually had any sort of significant, like where there was like something significant. And the thing was, we could just see, I mean, it's not like a big surprise, but the way we acquired the customer, that was the biggest predictor of churn, So customers that were acquired through that was this PLG motion. So people that actually tried the product before they bought it, I mean, it's not a surprise, they churned less. I know, like if you're in a phone company, this, like, that all the people that come through that, like, get a free phone, if you stay with us for 6 months or 12 months, they churn after 12 months. But yeah, that was like a realization we had that, hey, this sort of holistic data platform, data model, that actually is powerful for many other things.
Yeah. Now, I think that's a great segue into the next section, which I want to talk about where attribution is going, because I think activation has been a challenge once people get onto a platform. How do they activate that data? So tell me a little bit about where you see attribution and also Dreamdata going in the future. Like, what does the future look like?
So for us, the activation part is where we're investing the most at the moment. So that's where we're going, creating data activations. First step has been this like ad platform integrations with conversion data. So that's a big thing. And then the next...
And just to hold on, I want to focus on that for real quick. So what you're saying is with Dreamdata, when somebody comes in through like a Google paid ad, you are collecting that information. You're collecting the CRM information that says, hey, what happened to this person that came through the Google paid ad? And then you are sending it bidirectionally back into Google so that Google's optimization engine can optimize your ad spend based on the results in the CRM. Is that, and that's all automated, correct?
Exactly. And I think like both...
That's really cool.
I think Google had they had this feature for B2C forever. And any large
offline conversions,
any large B2C spender is using this because it's like Google doesn't publish numbers, but this is like a huge driver of efficiency. Like you save a lot of money. Basically, just like what happens is, okay, you'll see some of these sort of early metrics of your ad campaigns. They might drop, like less traffic, maybe less conversions. But the thing you care about, which is maybe pipeline building or whatever you're feeding back, that increases, right? So it is super smart. And it does build sort of immediate efficiency in your campaigns. And of course, the more you spend, the more it's going to work. And the problem is like in B2C, this was, mostly e-commerce B2C. And that's super simple. Like I buy a campaign, people click the campaign, they come to my website, they look at my shoes, they buy my shoes. We just track back to Google, this guy bought some shoes. That's it. And then you can optimize. But in B2B, it's so complex because, somebody submits a form, and that's actually just some form that doesn't really mean anything. And then 6 months later, somebody else from the company buys the product. And you want to say like, yeah, that first conversion there, that was actually super valuable. Like we would like more of those people that came in 6 months ago. But to do that, you need that sort of neat data model that ties together as much of the customer journey as you possibly can. So that drives a lot of efficiency. LinkedIn, they publish numbers on this. So they launched their conversion API first version, I guess, like, I can't remember, maybe 2 years ago, and then recent version 3 or 4 months ago. We were launch partners for that together with Zapier and Google Tag Manager. But like we think ours, because we have that data platform, we kind of offer a full solution for it. Like they say, like their numbers is like 20% efficiency increase in your LinkedIn ads. So basically, without you going and optimizing anything, just by you telling LinkedIn that, look, these are actually the companies that converted in my pipeline, this is what I would like more of, then they will use their AI magic and they'll deliver more of those types of users to your website and run more of those campaigns. Yeah, I think I would say for us, we're leaning, because LinkedIn is such a massive ad player in the B2B landscape, we're leaning a lot into the relationship with LinkedIn and sort of building out features together with them that enhance how people can spend their money on LinkedIn and see what's becoming of it. So we're leaning heavily into that.
Okay. See, I love that because, to your point, the B2B conversions, the offline conversions in AdWords and LinkedIn, really easy to do for B2C, very difficult to do for B2B. And it's a pain in the ass to set it up just to get it right. So if you're able to automate that and create that throughput of data, I think that's a huge win for organizations. They're spending a decent amount of money in those platforms. I think that's going to help so much in optimizing that spend. I love that.
And then I'd say like the next thing then is like, I would say like audience building. So using all this, like, because you have this, there's like you got this like, okay, so maybe offline conversions or like conversions never really work for B2B, but like at least retargeting worked for B2B. But then third-party cookies died, and then it's like, what am I going to do about retargeting? And one of the big answers there is like, okay, get your act together on your first-party data. Make sure you have a great first-party data, customer data platform, and start using that data. And because the foundation of attribution is a great customer data platform, then delivering sort of abilities to build audiences and use them in your marketing, that's one of the big things that we will be looking into this year.
Love that. Love that. All right. Well, I know that we are running short on time, so I want to do a couple of one last question for you, Lars, before I wrap things up here. You're out in Denmark. For anyone thinking about visiting Denmark, and I've been to Denmark. I went to Copenhagen. I visited your location in 2021, different office now, but I came to your office in 2021. But for anybody thinking about visiting Denmark and Copenhagen, what do you recommend everybody does when they come out there?
So first of all, I would say if you are a B2B go-to-market professional, I would just connect with us and come and see us. We're quite centrally located and we don't have that many visitors, so we'll probably make you a cup of coffee and have a great chat with you if anybody wants to stop by the office. So that'd be great. Of course, outside of that, I think Copenhagen is at the moment known very much for being like a great food destination. I would bring a lot of money and go and visit a lot of restaurants. So there's a lot of good food in Copenhagen. I recommend that. Then I would say, okay, come in summertime, super nice, or during Christmas can also be very nice. But so yeah, but restaurants is great. Like everybody, I don't know, but most people know Tivoli Gardens. I think that's a standard stop on the trip here, and definitely worth it.
Yeah, the food, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but the food that I loved was your open face sandwiches, the smørrebrød.
Yeah,
Is that what it is?
Exactly.
Smørrebrød?
Yeah.
Oh, it was delicious. Yeah.
There's some good places. And also like you'll find sort of like traditional places, of course, but also you can find sort of like more sort of modern takes on it. Some great places. Yeah, but I mean,
I did enjoy the food.
If any listeners are coming to Copenhagen, do connect on LinkedIn. Happy to say hi and drink a cup of coffee and point you to the best smørrebrøds place in Copenhagen if you want.
There we go. Love it. Love it. So takeaway there is if you're visiting Copenhagen, stop in a Dreamdata. Lars is going to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you and tell you where to get the best. I know I'm butchering the pronunciation, but smørbrød, close-ish? Not even close. Okay. All right. Anyway, so I want to just wrap up real quick with a couple of quick main takeaways that I think I found from our conversation is number one, I think that fundamentally marketers need to have a data strategy of some sort. It's going to be different for every organization. It's going to be different for the different sizes of organizations, but you got to have something. Then we need to activate that data, which is really what attribution is mostly about, is activating that data and turning it into insights. And where we're kind of heading with attribution platforms in the future is creating some automation around that activation. We also need to really empower creativity and creating that R&D budget within the marketing budget that allows us to experiment and get a little crazy sometimes, even with things that we may not be able to measure well, because you may not be able to measure it right out of the gate, but you can create measurement strategies down the road if it's working. And then another piece is connecting data, not having silos. Again, the attribution platforms like Dreamdata really help solve that because it collects everything into one system. And then ultimately, everybody needs to have a marketing co-founder because it just helps with creativity and things of that nature. So, it helps you, particularly if your product solves marketing challenges, it's really helpful to have a marketing co-founder. Those are my key takeaways from the conversation. So Lars, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share this journey that you've been on and the Dreamdata has been on. It's really great to have our partnership and also just to have the time to talk to you today. I think what you guys are doing is really great. And so just really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. It's been great.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know there if you'd like access to our private group where we keep these conversations going. On our next episode, we'll be talking with Eric, the CEO of Caliber Mind, who asked the question, if you're not using attribution, what are you using? How can you know where to invest more or less? Surely you can't simply use your gut, right? Hope you'll take a listen.